we regurgitate too much information and we don't decipher it and try to make it where there's value of our own.
Hello, and welcome to the Physical Preparation Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Robertson, and I'll be joined on the line later today by the incomparable Joe Kenn. Now, before we jump into this week's episode, I want to give you a quick recap of the week that was, what's going on this week, talk about my book of the week, and then also give you a little food for thought. If you are struggling, if you don't feel like you're making the kind of inroads or seeing the success that you would like, I'm going to give you a little nugget that has worked very well for me in recent weeks. So last week, what happened? All the usual stuff. Had my regular coaching clients. Training is going incredibly well. Very happy with how my body feels, how I'm moving, getting in the gym 4 or 5 days a week, and just trying to get as much momentum going as possible because at some point, i.e. in the summer, basketball guys will be back, my college athletes will be back, and so I know I'm going to have to go into more of a maintenance mode then. So just trying to kill it as much as I can over the next couple months. Also good incentive knowing that I'm going on spring break in about 6 weeks and I need to be on a beach in a swimsuit. So no motivation, like a little bit of potential shame. So that's what is kind of going on over the weekend. As you know, we're going through the Marvel movies. So we watched Ant-Man and Wasp on Friday. Maybe not my favorite movie, but still entertaining. Saturday, we're watching WandaVision, which didn't know how I felt about that originally, but really enjoying that show and really enjoying where they're taking that. I think it's done incredibly well. And I love how each one of these movies, and it feels like each one of these series that Disney's creating, is really going to kind of tie into the larger story. So very impressed with that. And then yesterday was Sunday, but the kids don't have school the next 2 days. They kind of have like a 4-day weekend. So we watched Captain Marvel. So lots and lots of Marvel stuff going on. Let's see. Cade had some soccer and some basketball this weekend. Like, just so happy for this guy. I mean, he was so down on himself the first couple weeks of basketball, and I really thought he was going to quit. And he got another bucket. So he was jazzed about that, and then had indoor the next day, and he got not 1, but 2 goals. So, I mean, just really happy for him. He's an athletic guy. I don't know how competitive he is just yet. He's definitely not the most aggressive kid, but, he's definitely got some skills. So excited for him and just excited for him to be enjoying sports. And then the last thing for kind of last week, Bill and I got in the gym and we shot the second part to our iFastU video. And what we're doing now is basically trying to find a way to blend the theoretical with the applied. So what we did was, like 2 weeks ago, we went into the purple room and we just talked supine pressing, AKA bench pressing, and just broke it down. Like, okay, what's happening at the shoulder joint? What happens when you arch really hard? What happens when you move your hands in on the bar, out on the bar, or you use a neutral grip? What happens when you have a big arch? What happens when you have no arch? So we can really take a deep dive into understanding what's going on in the body to help you better choose what exercise progression or regression works best for you. So that was really fun. And that's kind of Bill's world. And then on Friday, we went in the gym and we just got after it as far as, okay, if you want to have the most extreme arch like a power lifter would coach, or you just want to move the absolute most weight possible with no regard for how your body moves or feels afterwards, how do you do it? And on the flip side of that, if you have a Gen Pop client who has a history of shoulder pain or back pain, or they just want to build some showy muscles and stay healthy and feel good, how would you coach that? How would you coach an athlete? How do things change when you go from a barbell to dumbbells? So, man, I'm really excited about how these pieces are coming together. And I think it's going to give the people that are members of iFastU a more big picture view as to why we choose certain exercises, the thought process that we have, but then also that applied element of, okay, now that I know what exercise to choose, how do I go in the gym and coach and cue it to the best of my ability? So not meaning for this to be like an iFastU plug, even though it might have came out that way, just really excited about that content and where it's going. So that's last week. This week, we're just getting pummeled with snow. As I'm sitting here, I cleaned the driveway this morning by the time I got home from work, like 4 hours later, because I didn't want to be in the mess of traffic later in the day, I mean, it was already kind of dusted over, and I think we're getting like 10 or 12 inches of snow. So I don't see us doing a whole lot this week. I do have some podcasts lined up. I've got my guy Joel Jameson coming back on, who, like Joe Kenn, is in that like 4 to 5-ish range. He's been on the show quite a few times now. So excited to get Joel back on. Just always enjoy talking with him. And then Kyle Pfaffenbeck as well. So, or Pfaffenbach, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name, but very excited to have him on as well, because we need more nutrition people on, and just excited to see what he's going to talk about. So that's kind of an overview of what's been going on. People have been jiving with the books. So my book for this week is Stillness is the Key. If you have not read this book, I would highly recommend it. It is another one of the Ryan Holiday books, but Stillness is the Key. And it's one of those where, okay, maybe you could just read the title and kind of surmise what's going on, but just great stories in there. And I love how he uses a story to kind of introduce the topic and then builds on that theme as he goes through the various sections. And I think in this day and age where we're always talking about how busy we are and we're always connected, whether it's with our phone or, email on our laptop or our iPad, whatever device we have, we're more connected than ever before. And I don't always think that's a good thing, because I think there are definitely times where we need to find distance, where we need to create space, where we need to create that stillness so we can have thoughts and we can be kind of better versions of ourselves. And I think when we have those moments of stillness, that's where we have some of those big breakthroughs. Like what's really important, it's where we solve some of those complex problems when we find those times of space. So if you have not read this book, I can't recommend it highly enough. I would also say if you enjoy this book, you'll probably enjoy most of his books. Ego is the Enemy, Obstacle is the Way, all fantastic books. And probably over the last couple of years, he's definitely my favorite author. So that is the book of the week. Last but not least, something to marinate on and something that I think will help you. Now, I really hope I didn't talk about this a couple weeks ago. If I did, I apologize. And it's only because this is such an important thing to focus on. I think at various times of the year, we all encounter resistance, right? Maybe it's resistance to our exercise routine. Maybe it's resistance to the nutritional program we know we should be following. Maybe it's resistance to continuing education and continuing to further ourselves as trainers and coaches. And so I know there's a lot of people that buy into the whole eat the frog concept. And there are times that works. First thing in the day, you do the highest priority task. And I can get behind that, especially if you don't have a lot of resistance or you've got a lot of motivation. By all means, knock out that first and most important task first. Now, what happens when you do have a high level of resistance? What happens when you just can't get your mojo working and you don't feel like you're going to be successful no matter what you do? This is where I'm a big believer in the small wins concept. And I'm going to give you a couple practical examples, and then I want you to think about how this might apply to you. So a couple weeks ago, there was just like this ever-growing laundry list of items I needed to do around our house. Now, let's be real here. I do not in any way, shape, or form fancy myself as this elite handyman, but I can get enough stuff done, given the proper time and the tools and minimal interruptions or distractions. I feel like I can handle a lot of low-level tasks. So anyway, this weekend comes around and I know there's all these tasks, and I'm sitting in Cade's room. It's like the middle of the day, and I'm looking at his light. And he has had this one light bulb burned out in his room for I don't know how long. And I think we just kind of ignored it because, there's 3 lights there. So if one's out, it doesn't make that big of a difference. So I'm like, no, this is enough. We're going to fix this light today. So I know it sounds simple and I know it sounds silly, but I fixed that one light bulb and I was like, hey, wow, that makes a big difference in here. What else can I do that's very easy? So the next thing I did, Jess had 2 light bulbs out over her vanity. Now, again, she's got like 4 light bulbs, but okay, I'm going to replace, in this case, I replaced all 4 so they would be uniform. I'm like, wow, that made a big difference. So then things just kind of rolled from there, right? Like I got those 2 jobs done. And then one of our toilets had started to go out. So I replaced, not the whole toilet, I'm not that skilled, but the inner workings of it and the pipe, the drain pipe that connects to it. So I did that in one bathroom and I got that done pretty well. And a while back, I bought a couple of them. So I went in the kids' bathroom and I did it in theirs and I got that fixed. So I'm telling you all this because small wins can get the motivation going. They can break up or get the momentum and the inertia going in our direction. Same thing with Cade in his sports. You know, a while back, like he didn't have a great experience in soccer because he was around all these kids that were incredibly good for their age level. I mean, we had first grade kids that I was calling the cheat code because they could have played in third and fourth grade. So he didn't have the best soccer experience. Then he comes into basketball and it took him a while to get going. But hey man, now he got a couple buckets. So now he's excited to go to basketball. He got a couple goals. So he's super excited to go play soccer now. So I want you to think about how can this small win concept apply to your life? What area are you struggling in? And again, maybe it's your training. Maybe you're just struggling to get into the gym or to get excited about working out. All right. Can you just go in and warm up and do a couple sets of squats and call it a day? Like that's a win, right? Like don't ever let somebody tell you that's not a win. That's not your workout program forever, but that's a win for today. For your nutrition, maybe you're struggling as you go through the week and you just know that, hey, by the end of the week, I don't want to cook, or I'm just going to stop and get carry out for the 5th time this week. Okay, well, maybe a small win would be on Sunday, you're going to carve out an hour to do your meal prep, or maybe Sunday and Wednesday. Like that's a real hack. Bill taught me that one. Like, you know, if somebody needs fat loss, instead of saying go in the gym 3 days a week, go in the gym Monday, Friday, and on Wednesday, use that day to meal prep for the second half of the week. Because the nutrition game is super important when it comes to that. You know, if it's Con Ed, and this is something I know I've talked about in numerous places, but too often we get caught up in this idea of perfect. Oh, well, if I don't have 60 minutes to get my Con Ed done, then that's not a win for the day. BS, man. No, go watch one of Bill's videos. Go, watch one of Lee Taft's videos. Listen to my intro, even though it's probably more than 5 minutes at this point, but listen to the first 10 minutes of a podcast. Like nobody says you have to do 60 minutes of Con Ed for it to be a win. Start with little wins. Get the momentum going. Start to just get yourself feeling good about yourself again and feel like, okay, hey, I'm stringing together some wins. I'm seeing some success. And ultimately, I think that's going to get the momentum going. Okay. So that's enough for me. I've talked far too long for this week. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to jump into this awesome show with my guy, Kenn. It seems like almost every day I talk to a young trainer or coach who is frustrated. Maybe they're frustrated with the results they're getting. Maybe they're frustrated because they don't have trusted resources to learn from. And maybe they're frustrated because they simply don't have enough clients and wonder how long they'll be able to stay in the industry. So if this sounds anything like you, I've got something that I know will help. My Complete Coach certification was created for trainers and coaches just like you, who are serious about the results they get and know that becoming a better coach can directly translate to a bigger bottom line. This certification is going to take the last 20 years of my life's work and put it all into one massive course. In it, you'll learn how to use the R7 system to create seamless, integrated, and efficient programs for clients and athletes of all shapes and sizes. How to create the culture, environment, and relationships with everyone you train so you can get the absolute best results. The exact progressions, regressions, and coaching cues I use in the gym, from squatting and deadlifting to pressing and pulling and everything in between. And last but not least, I've added an entire section on my assessment process and how to use that to write programs faster and more effectively than ever before. Of course, there's a ton more that I cover, but that should give you a pretty good idea of what the certification is all about. Now here's the thing, spots for the certification will open twice per year for a limited time only. If you're interested in learning more, my next certification will launch in March 2021, and if you join my free insiders list, you'll be able to save $200 when it opens. To get on the insiders list, just head over to CompleteCoachCertification.com. Again, CompleteCoachCertification.com, and then stay tuned for our launch emails coming very soon. Thanks so much for your support, and I hope you'll pick up a copy of the Complete Coach Certification when it launches. Our guest today needs little to no introduction. Kenn is a 32-year vet in the world of strength and conditioning, 20 plus years in the Division I setting, and the last 9 being in the NFL with the Carolina Panthers. As far as I know, he's the only voted on strength coach of the year in both college and professional sports. And look, the guy has just created success wherever he's been. He and I also did a series of 3 years, what we called the Elite Athletic Development Seminars, where we would go back and forth talking about the way we set up our programming, the way we coach our athletes. And I feel like it was a really unique and organic experience because we found this great blend of how he runs the tier system, how I use R7, and how both of these systems that we use can be used in an interchangeable fashion. So, my friend, I know you're going to love this show. We talk principles, we talk about brass tacks, we talk about continued success in this field, and I know you're going to love it. So, enough for me. Let's do this. Joe, man, so excited to have you back on the show here today. Thank you so much for coming on. Start by just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I hold the record for most episodes on the Mike Robertson podcast. So that makes me so much better and recognized than Andy McCloy.
Yeah, I think he's only 2, maybe 3.
Yeah,
but he's not on your level.
So if he adds another one, I'll have to come back on. But yeah, things are going great. It's a long and interesting journey. And the processes of traveling and trying to be sustainable, I think, is what allows for long-term longevity in this field. It's tough. Because as strength and conditioning coaches, we're not necessarily controlling our own destinies, especially those who've chosen to be in the team sports setting.
Yep.
And like we had talked off air, that's why I have so much respect for those strength and conditioning professionals who go off in the private sector, are willing to invest their own money and the leap of faith that gives them their own storefront and name on the building and be successful, because I know how hard that is. But you're your own boss and you get to control things. So it's a little bit different when you choose the path that I've chosen. And I've been on the private sector for 1 year as a coach, and then this year in a different role working for a dynamic fitness equipment company. The processes are a lot different because you are really at the beck and call of success. And if you go through life, everybody climbs. I've read the book Halftime, and it's about your life's journey. And that first half of most people's life, it's about success, right? I've got to be number one. I've got to be the best this. I've got to make the most money. And sometimes when you hit that midlife, I don't want to say midlife crisis, but when you reach that midpoint in your career, you realize, okay, what have you really done in this path? And that's when you learn about significance, right?
Yep.
And when you were mentoring kids on the way up or mentoring young coaches on the way up, your mentorship starts changing. Now you become more of I don't want to say a preacher, but you really become more of a teacher, like giving. And that's one of the things that I think I've done, especially in the last probably 5 to 9 years. I've become more of a person that wants to tell you what I learned from my mistakes and be humbled enough and transparent enough to tell you that I tell you this because I've already done it.
Right.
Like I'm not ripping you about your jumping jack power reverse curl cleans because I've never done it. I've done it.
Right.
And I've accepted the fact that that's not right.
Right.
And I don't want you to make those mistakes moving forward when someone like myself is telling you need to self-evaluate and understand those things. So the journey of the path of the career, you get highs and lows. You climb the pinnacle, you win some championships and bowl games. Again, some of the things we talked offline, is the challenge still there for you?
Right.
I don't want, I'm not going to say, people talk about like complacency, bored, but stagnant, right? And when you continue to be at places for a long time, it's human nature for that stuff to kind of creep up if nothing's challenging you.
Yeah.
Like, what's the next year's challenge? There's always certain challenges, but in the end, if the process or the whole is very similar, every year you're with a team sport, there's a new challenge. It's a new team. Mm-hmm. But those coaches, I hold a very much high respect for the coaches who are able to make very long runs at universities under the same program. It's different if you change coaches. Like when I was at Boise State, and that process was different. When I was at Boise State, obviously, football's football. I worked for 5 different football coaches. So there was always a different challenge because you had to prove yourself. But on the other hand, back in those days, we worked with 17 sports. So there was always challenges that were going to make you rise to the occasion. When you get into a single sport strength coach, there's different challenges, but the overall structure of your day and of the year is kind of stagnant. It's going to be the same.
It's routine.
This 8 weeks. The routine becomes very, very similar. And regardless of the faces changing, what's the new challenge for yourself? Like, okay, this date I'm going here. This date I need to have this done. These reports are due here. And it's the same routine, just different names.
Yep.
It's the same challenges in season, different names. I'm talking probably with not enough emotion. Now, those people mean a lot. The athletes are extremely important, and you're going to invest as much as you can into each athlete to make sure that they are protected and persevere through a season. But then on January 1st or February 7th, depending on how far you go in the playoffs, most of those guys disappear till April.
Right.
And it becomes a whole new process over and over again. So the journey is going to be a lot based off of the situations you're in, how you respond to them, and are you willing to look in the mirror and be very self-analytical and self-critical. It's very hard to be self-critical. Like, people want to blame others for things going bad, or why aren't you here? Why aren't you there? After self-evaluation, I don't worry about why I'm not somewhere. I worry about why am I in this place and what is the direction I need to head to be successful. I can't answer questions about, well, why don't you think so-and-so did this? Or why don't you think so-and-so took you here? I don't care. That's for someone else to answer. All I know is this is my situation, and I've got to make the best of it. And I can't worry about why not, or why didn't this happen. I've got to worry about, okay, how am I going to dominate in the next position I'm in to stay in somewhat a relevant sense in my field?
Yeah.
And that's how the journey goes. The climb, the opportunities to make moves, you put yourself in that by how hard you worked with your athletes and what other people speak of you. And then it's your job when you go to that next step to show them that they were right.
Yep.
Like, oh, this guy's the man. Well, is he really? Like, it's just like how many times, and I think we were going to go into this, but how many times do we hear this guy's such a great coach? Like, oh man, this dude is the best. Oh, you actually saw him coach? No, I've never seen him coach. Well, then how are you saying this guy's the best? Well, I've heard him speak. I said, I've heard a lot of people speak too. And I've watched them coach. And I've seen a lot of people speak, and you're like, golly, this guy, who? And then you watch him coach, and then you're saying that guy should never present.
Right.
We should just invite people to the weight room and watch this fool coach, because this is some of the best coaching I've ever seen. So I think it's all perception. And my perception is always going to be someone who's 100% reality TV. And that's hard to do. There's no absolute. So you're probably 98, 99, because there's always a game to be played. Let's just face it.
Yeah.
There's always a game that's being played. And that's part of the things you learn in your journey, right? Until you figure out how the game's played and how you fit in that game, we always used to kid about it. And I just said it to a couple of my buddies. We're all in a Game of Thrones. If you've watched that series, we all live in a Game of Thrones, regardless of what jobs we're in, whether it's the physical fitness industry, whether it's corporate America, whether it's Silicon Valley, it's a game. And those who understand the chess match of it, because some people are playing checkers while others are playing chess. Yep. And nothing against the game of checkers, but it's simple compared to playing the game of chess. And you've got to be aware of that as you climb. Just like you need to, I can't say this, but I would think playing checkers is going to be something that helps you play chess. I don't know. I don't play either. But it's just like you can't jump into velocity-based training if you don't know basic training intensities and sets and rep schematics.
Yep.
I think there's always going to be something to be said about understanding why some of this works. You can't there's a lot of things that have changed my thought process and how I need to educate myself on certain things, but then also understand that I need to bring somebody in who's an expert of that and then feed me the data I need for the things that I'm going to continue to replicate.
Yep. Okay.
So again, it's not a climb of, well, I did this for 8 years, and I know that's
Right.
not what you wanted.
That's okay.
It's what you see, and it's no different than training an athlete on a 12-week block. You're going to climb the ladder, you're going to take a dive. You're going to climb the ladder, you're going to readjust. But what you hope is every peak gets a little bit higher up to an apex, so that when it's all said and done, you can feel pretty proud about what you've been able to accomplish and hopefully what you've been able to give back. Because, you got to pay it forward. You're on the shoulders of people who have helped set the standards before you, and you've got to be aware of that. I don't think enough people in this era understand all the people who did all the dirty work for us to be where we're at. Yeah. And that's something that, I'll be talking about in a couple of talks later on this year.
Okay. So when I was crafting these very rough questions for you, one of the things that immediately came to mind, or a word that came to mind, was continued success, right? We've all seen people, they've been successful for 2 years or 5 years or maybe 10 years. But I mean, look, we talked about this, 32 years now you've been at this. I feel like you've had a certain level of success at every single stop along the way. What is something that you attribute that to? It could be a character trait, something that you've done. What do you attribute that continued success to?
I would say keeping the faith, believing in what you do and not altering that regardless of what other people may say about it. Being true to yourself, trying to be honest and open from a personality and emotional standpoint, not creating a fictitious you. I think we see that a lot of times in coaching. You see the more popular guys in coaching have a certain persona to them. And then you get to that point, well, I've got to act like that, or I've got to be like that. And it's not sustainable. So if I say one word that I've said a lot when it comes to my programming, I think there's the same thing with your life expectancies too, is how well can you maintain sustainability is how well you can adapt to the environment that's being recreated every day without stepping out of who you are, what you are, and what you believe. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. I think in this day, you see a lot of jumping, right? I remember the era of when Louis started to show up. There was the traditional models, and I don't want to just lump things. And then Coach Gambetta with the true functional training of med ball, stability ball, balancing, stuff like that.
Yep.
That had all kind of peaked almost at the same time around the late 90s or early 2000s. These genres were pushing in this direction of explosion. And I think a lot of coaches were getting driven in different roads, right? The highway was splitting up into like a trifecta. You get to the stop line, you got 3 streets to go on, and people were just jumping from street to street.
Yep.
And they weren't being sustainable. So, hey, I'm going to try West Side for 8 weeks. I didn't like what I saw. I'm going to go to, BOSU balls, stability balls, and med balls for 8 weeks. Well, that wasn't right. And then I'm going to go circle back to this, or so-and-so's doing that, and you're reaching for a grab bag instead of formulating what your plan, you see this vision of your plan, and then looking at these systems or programming or modalities and figuring out, okay, how do I grab these things and mold this into what you believe in? And that's what I've done.
Yeah.
Like I'll just tell you flat out. I think that one of the sustainability successes of what I've done is been able to really, do the acronym or whatever the word's right of, the saying that I got from Dave Tate on an article, absorb, modify, and apply. If you can live by that, you're going to win. And I remember, Dave went to a Swiss conference. I think I was at Arizona State at this time. I think Dave was writing a lot for TMAG, when a lot of guys were writing for TMAG, when that was one of the most popular sites, if not the most popular site to get your information off the internet at that time. And he wrote a Swiss conference recap. And one of the subtitles was absorb, modify, and apply. And he was going through his things. And I was like, that applies to everything.
Yep.
It applies to everything we're doing. So I stole it, and I continue to give him credit for it because I didn't create it. And So I use that in everything I do in life. Even now, what I'm learning in business and what I'm learning in this role, how do I absorb, modify it, apply it, put it in my daily life and whatever that next, wherever the next journey takes me. So I think that's the biggest thing. How do you be continued success? One, you got to believe in yourself and be willing to adapt to the times without changing who you are. You can't go in and out of a character.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with your programming. I mean, I've watched you do the same programming, and then all of a sudden you create the 7 R's based off the programming. It wasn't like the 7 R's changed their program.
Nope.
The program created the 7 R's. Just like I like the 7 R's. I've got 11.
Yeah.
But it all based through how I develop my daily plan. And I just use that terminology because it's easy.
Yeah.
And it's what's the right word? It makes sense, one, but there's a word and I'm not very good at it. So it's just one of those things when you're talking about different things, you just build on it. Like I remember when we went into 7 R's, I said, damn, Mike, for all you do, you didn't write anything about core training. And then I said, that's called the root. Yeah. Like, how the hell does Mike Robertson not have that in the program? Right. And I'll tell you a thing. So I'm going to do an ebook on truly like practical neck training for sport.
Oh, nice.
It's going to be based off of financially, I don't want to say strapped, but bare basic types of things that I've learned that you can have productivity in training the neck and the musculature around the neck. And I started to call it head support because really what are we doing when we're training the muscles of the neck, trap, and posterior shoulder? You're supporting the head.
Right.
And then I said, okay, well, now I got to find an R for this. Right? So I dig around. So now I call it reinforcement because what I'm trying to do is build a muscular structure to reinforce head support. So like now when you see my upper body program, it's got like reset, root, reboot, reinforcement, and then readiness. And then I actually go into the program. So hell, I can just train you off of that part of the pre-act. And I lump all that into what I call pre-activity preparation, which I learned I stole that. And I always give him credit. I stole that from Charles Staley. Mm-hmm. Charles Staley said that, well, probably 20 years ago, I heard him say that. I'm like, because remember, everybody's like, it's not a warm-up, right? Everybody would call it warming up. And it's such a general term. It's like the difference between working out and training, right?
Yep.
Well, are you working out or you're training? Are you warming up or you're prepared? So when he said pre-activity prep, I was like, there's the ideal terminology to use for that first part of the program that we were calling warm-up. Because now you go pre-activity prep, main session, post-activity prep, which would be your recovery and regen. And I was like, so it's all when you learn these things and you figure out how they play, they just fall into a nice mesh, and then you know you've got something. If it doesn't fall into something that's like very moldable and it creates a masterpiece, then obviously the ingredients are off. But this is just simple stuff. Like people are trying to complicate things. This is like just simple things of just listening to people speak, listening how they dissected how a program should be run. Somebody comes up with a cool way of doing it, and then how do you bring it into your program? Everything I talked about does nothing to change the sustainability and the basics of what the tier system is.
Yep.
All it does is helps organization of building out what a daily plan looks like.
Yep.
And that's what people need to do.
Okay, so look, here's the problem. And so here we can just start diving off script right away. But like you talked about it up front, you have principles. Therefore, you have a filter to put things through. If you don't have principles, then you can be swayed by anything, right? And back in the day, it was T-Nation, and luckily there were only like 5 articles a week. You know, so if somebody says something one day and somebody says something else the next, you only got to deal with like 5 voices or 10 or whatever, you know, the authorship was at the time. Now, everybody on the internet has a voice, right? So I think it's only gotten worse. Like I see kids that are, you know, coming in and they've tried like 20 different programs by the time they're like 14, 15 years old, can't figure out why they haven't had success yet.
Or they're hurt.
or both, right?
Yeah.
So how do you, this is going to be a tough one, but like, how did you go about?
I have the answer, but go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. No. Give me the answer. I want the answer.
So you were going to go, how do you go about deciphering all this information?
Yeah.
Okay, here's what you got to do. And we talked a little bit about this. I will tell you this. We've created platforms and we've come into that. Again, it's no different than what we're seeing in athletes today, right? players voicing their opinions
Yep.
and having the ability to do so. We are in that world. That's society as its hand. We have given everybody a place at the table, regardless of if they've earned a right.
Right.
And when we came up, you had to earn the right to say something
Right.
before you were asked your opinion.
Yep.
I mean, it was a true hierarchy of respect, the elders, so to speak, and
Yep.
you had to work your way into that position. Nowadays, you don't. I'm a big fan of Ronnie McKeefery's CEO strength coach. In this era, I think that's something that needed to be produced for this era of strength coach, because what we learned in our careers were, especially when you're in the team sports, you had to be all in with these coaches and all in with these teams and universities you worked with. But yet, when they threw you to the curb, there was no one there to help you. And that's where, like, a lot of Ronnie's stuff talking about using a website as part of your resume, right? Creating a blog so coaches can see what you are, knowing all these apps, right? Finding outside streams of revenue to help you in times of need.
Yep.
I think that needs to be said, because we missed the boat on that in our generation. But like everything else, a lot of people ran with that, and now we opened. So in some ways, the information needs to be out there, and Ronnie did a terrific job of presenting that information. But then, like we see, we're in the how do I get to B without worrying about the process?
Right.
So a lot of people have taken that, well, if Ronnie McKeefery wrote this book and he's doing it for 20 years, then it's okay for me to do all this other stuff and get my stuff out there. And that's true. I've read a lot of things that are out there from people way younger than me and people with less experience, but I know how to decipher that information.
Right.
And what I also know is I know where it's coming from. So I can look at it. And that's where I tell people, when you are dealing with things, this will be the go-to term that I will use. And I say this with a lot of stuff when it comes to this day and age of what's going on in social media and people who put out things. And like I said, I have the ultimate respect for anyone, regardless whether I watch them, regardless if I read them, regardless if anything that goes and has a leap of faith and creates a product that they believe in their heart is something that they have a love and passion for and are willing to share it with the masses.
Yep.
Everybody has their fan club, so to speak.
Yep.
Whether I'm in that fan club or not is irrelevant to you. But know that I respect what you've done.
Yep.
The fact that people will go all in and bet on themselves, because I've had to do that. When you bet on yourself and you win, I hold you in high regard. The guys like J.L. Holsworth, yourself, and the people I know, Ricky Prohl, who put their name on a storefront and invested their own money and time to make it work, I have high level of respect for people like that. People who create products that have been highly successful, and you can see the success, and you can see the followers. I respect that. Whether I agree with it, certain things or not, is irrelevant to that.
Right.
You're not worrying about me. You're worrying about, hey, man, I'm trying to make a living. I got these people that believe in what I'm doing. What do I do next? Mm-hmm. So what you have to do, regardless of that, what you have to do as an individual is you got to peel back the onion. So different people at different points in their careers and lives will have a different peel for each individual person. Like in coaching, I've coached 32 years. I've coached 29 of them in team sports settings. If I read an article of somebody who's telling me how to train a team and how they would do it, the first layer is, have you ever trained in a team sports setting?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I don't care how old you are, but that's my first question is, well, how are you going to tell me how to do something you've never done?
Yep.
Because I've been in the private sector, and I know the restraints that I have in the team setting versus the private sector is totally different.
Yep.
I have CBA, NCAA, high school association rules and regulations on time restraints, days of the week, how many points in a year that I have to give them off. You don't have that.
Right.
So you could, well, if I was there doing that too. Yeah. And if I was training that same guy in your world, I wouldn't be doing a lot of the same stuff I'm doing now. That's why the organizational processes of the 7 R's or pre-activity prep or a tier system or whatever the way you do it, You need that stuff in team settings with time restraints.
Yes.
Because it helps you factor things in.
Yep.
Then, you're going to talk to me about being a leader. Well, who have you led?
Yes.
I mean, it's just simple question. It becomes an interrogation, right? It just becomes it's you doing personal research. Like, man, I really, really like this guy, or I really, really like what this woman's saying. Okay, well, before I go more into it, let me figure out who these people are.
Yep, absolutely.
And again, I hold certain things in different regards than others. Leadership, to me, I believe you need to show me where you were a leader.
Yes.
And what your leadership capabilities were. I'm not saying, you have to be in sports to be, but I want to know, like, what has made you the go-to person that we're paying $50,000 as a university for you to come in and talk about leadership. I just want to know that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're not qualified, just like, I'm going to listen to certain coaches. Other coaches I'm probably not going to listen to because their definition of what a coach means is different than mine.
Yep.
There's levels. There's a difference between being an assistant coach versus a head coach. Yeah, you were there and you won those games, and that's fine and well. But it's different when your name's on the storefront and your name's on the head coach because you're just reaping all the benefits.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And that's what coaches need to understand is this isn't a beratement of people, what's going on. I mean, I know there's a lot of people, House doesn't like this guy, House doesn't like that guy. It has nothing to do with me liking them. I just know where they fit in my thought process. It's not liking. Like I said, I respect anybody who's out there killing it.
Yeah.
And it's not about me. I don't like. I just know what I know. I know what I want to know.
Yep.
And regardless of what that product is, when I peel back the onion of this individual, my intel tells me that, I can see why he or she has a reach with these people, but it's not really copacetic with my style.
Right.
I'll get my information from someone else. Same thing with programming. A lot of cool stuff out there, right?
Yep.
A lot of cool stuff. But I know what I need to fit my world, and I know what doesn't fit.
Yep.
And I know how to decipher stuff. Like, again, I laugh, and I'm not saying this because this shows you how people have a lack of understanding and they do a lack of self-education and what I would call film breakdown on stuff. How many times I've heard the questions of, can triphasic work with the tier system? Well, then you really don't know what triphasic is, and you really don't know what the tier system is, because triphasic is based off of training cycles, varying intensities, efforts, sets and rep schemes per whatever weeks.
Right.
Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Bar speed.
Where the tier system is based off of exercise and choice of order of movements. So why would you need to ask that question if you didn't already? Why are you asking that? You should have already have done that research.
Right. You
should have already know it works.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. But so this is the problem, right? The thing that you're saying here is like peel back one layer of the onion. Like people are either unwilling or unable for whatever reason to even do that entry level stuff. And I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if it's just easy to have it spoon fed to you via the internet or. Well,
I think some of it too is marketing.
Yeah,
right?
That's fair.
I mean, the guys who understand that part of it, it's man. And I'm not saying this. There's a guy we both know, and I remember him saying it. Sometimes you got to look like you're successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he had invested all his money in his product and had to go to his first show. And he went broke on his display because he didn't want it to be the lowest level of display.
Oh my gosh.
So he went out and got the biggest level of display to prove. And guess what? Now he's a multimillionaire. So he bet on himself and he won, because when people, you've been in those exhibit halls.
Yeah.
Who are you gravitating to? You gravitating to the 10 by 10 booth or the 100 by 100 booth people?
Yeah, exactly. The animal cage.
Yeah, exactly. We've been there.
Yeah.
You going to the animal cage or the little guy that's always stuck in the corner behind the karate matches?
Right.
I mean, it's like, why do you think like back in the day where Muscle Milk when you'd go to the Arnold and the Muscle Milk sign was bigger than the entire damn building.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it too. And we are in that give it to me now. I need it now.
Yep.
Not, hey, let me figure this out before I apply. See, and that's where the absorb, modify part comes in. No one wants to absorb and modify. They just want to grab it and apply it. And the other thing that I think we've got to remember is, and I've said this a few years ago, and I still think this, we regurgitate too much information and we don't decipher it and try to make it where there's value of our own.
Yep.
Like I've always told people, I never mentored any of the coaches, and I honestly believe this. I never when I had our people work for me, we were always a unified approach when I oversaw the entire department. Every team trained the tier system. How you manipulated that, there was a lot of freedom, but the template itself, we were going to be this across the board. But I always said, you have to learn all the modalities of training, because that's how the tier system was developed. It was developed on the fact that I was exposed to all the different programming that was going on at one time, and how could you consolidate this stuff. But I always believed that when those coaches went out on their own, they automatically don't do the tier system. They have to do their version of what the best program is for them.
Yep.
And I think that I would venture to think that a lot of some of the things we did through the tier system are always going to be ingrained in them. But I know several of the coaches that have moved on from me that were able to express themselves differently in program design than the tier system. And I know others that, believed in it wholeheartedly, like, yeah, I'm cool.
Right.
But it wasn't force-fed down your throat. Like a lot of these people now, they only know one distinct way of training. And what, like I said yesterday on a podcast, the great thing about training athletes is there is no absolute.
Right.
There's no one way.
Yep.
Because we are not the fundamental sport itself.
Yep.
We are a secondary enhancement to the sport the athlete plays in. It's totally different than being a lifter. People, it's so simple sometimes. It's like, God, come on, man. If you're a power lifter and walk in the gym, that's your practice field.
Yes.
But if I play football, that damn sure ain't my practice field. And I just came off it, and you're asking me to go to practice again? Yeah, I'm not doing that, coach. So it's a different, you have to understand that stuff. And that's just years of common sense and communicating and being around the athletes and understanding some are going to take it more important than others.
Yep.
And now your goal is, how do you build relevance in the ones who don't see it as a way to protect themselves and to help produce a higher level of performance when they are on the practice field in their specific work.
Yeah.
And these are the things that people don't want to know. Like, how many people out there now really can describe their program to you?
Yeah. Well, okay. So this brings up a great point though, too. Like, you talk about there's no absolutes when you train athletes. Like, case in point, think about how much your programs have evolved in the 32 years you've been doing this, right? And let's just go even a little bit further. Let's go to whenever you designed the tier system, however long you've been using that. How much has the tier system evolved in that period of time, right?
Well, yeah, because the exercise pools changed. Like the structure hasn't changed. Like
exactly
the five tiers. But what's come in that, like now, like even when we did our stuff.
Yep.
And we went through how we were integrating movement prep and different types of reboot or activation movements based off functional movement screens.
Yep.
Well, when we changed the role again, we moved some of that out. But like just in the upper body alone, it went from, a single exercise was in that tier. And then you had to mix and match. A vertical press is here. Then we got to put a vertical pull somewhere else. And then there's a horizontal pull here. So I got to put a horizontal press here and so forth and so on. And then it became where you start looking at it and you said this before I have, and a lot of other good people, if your program is right, you're handling a lot of things, right? You're handling compensation, you're handling prehab.
Yep.
And again, a tough part of athletes when it comes to injuries are shoulders. The shoulder is a complex joint. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to get into it. I'm not smart enough to get into it. But we all know, if you want to use the word ambidextrous, it's probably one of the most, if not the most ambidextrous joint that we have. with the capabilities and the different movement patterns it can be in. So it's really susceptible to a lot of injuries.
Yeah.
Well, that's got to be focused on.
Yeah.
And that's why what we're doing now is in our neck program, that we building the neck. The neck is not just training the neck. It's the neck, traps, and posterior shoulder. That's your support. So we're always going to do some type of posterior shoulder capsule work in the neck training. But then we're also going to do things in the tiers now where this is a recommendation, but in every upper body tier, for the first 3 tiers anyway, there's some type of trifecta work. And that means it's a 3-exercise medley.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing a horizontal press, within that tier, you're doing a horizontal pull and a posterior shoulder work. And depending on how it's scripted will depend on how many times the posterior shoulder works in. So if I'm doing, say, a Prilipin-based cycle, I'll always have 3 to 4 preparation progression sets till I get to that top set of the week.
Yep.
So during that, you'll do a horizontal row, the press, and a posterior shoulder. And then when you get to the bench press work sets, the posterior shoulder drops off, and then you're just pairing the horizontal row movement for the day and the horizontal press. So a tier, which used to be a specific exercise, is now specific patterning.
Mm-hmm.
So you got one tier would be a vertical push-pull day. One tier is a horizontal, and that might be truly bilateral barbell work or dumbbell. And then you have your dumbbell day. And then you have now, again, here's one point that I brought up. I think I'll be interested to see like yourself and a guy like Bill Hartman said in the mid 90s to the early 2000s, especially when I first was working on the tier system. So it'd be more than mid 90s. Everything became like prime mover emphasis, right?
Yeah.
When everybody thought there was a thing called sport specific strength training. So it was prime movers, prime movers, prime movers. And I think that was an era where we were seeing a lot more shoulder issues because we weren't doing enough back.
Yeah.
Everything was press, 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 press. And that was also a time where it was told isolation type movements are not necessary when you train an athlete. Mm. So the leg curl, leg extensions, and all that stuff, all that bodybuilding fluff stuff was not necessary. So remember, everybody started throwing them out. You stopped seeing those types of machines in college and high school and pro weight rooms. And then the funny part is, how did a kid who got hurt start rehab? With isolative movements.
Right.
So then you get into, then this wave is like, now, if depending on what your background is, and again, I always say the best thing about my powerlifting career, because the numbers were awful, was it exposed me to Powerlifting USA, which exposed me to Louis Simmons and opened up a whole new world of reading, studying, and implementation.
Yep.
Well, what did his program talk about? And now I think Matt Wenning's done a very good job of carrying some of those principles over. But what do those guys talk about is, train your weak points, train your weak points, train your weak points. Well, generally, the weak points become a specific muscle group is not allowing you to be more productive in a complex muscle group, complex movement.
Sure.
So what does that mean? Well, that means isolative movements.
Right.
So I had built a 7-tiered program where tiers 6 and 7 were literally secondary assistance, which is isolated single joint movements, and threw that out because I could fit those in at different points of the program. But now, especially in the NFL, I saw my tier 4 and 5 stuff becoming more isolated single joint, like mini circuits or medleys, because those became more protection tiers.
Yeah. Where
they used to be what Dave Tate helped me term strength mobility, because like tiers 4 and 5 would be your single leg work, your lunges, your step ups, or your pseudo single leg, which you use, your pistol squats, all your dumbbell work for upper body, probably a dumbbell snatch for total body. So Dave termed that strength mobility. So I always considered that a cool term for those movement-based strength exercises.
Yep.
And it kind of fit what we were doing. It was a good genre. It was a good way to explain programming to the kids and to the coaches. But now I've seen where, especially in the the lower body and the upper body tiers 4 and 5, they became more and more single joint isolative movements for protection.
Yep.
And as I look at it, I think that could fit your higher level college guys. But at some point, everything comes back full circle, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's what I think we've seen because of the abilities of great people to expose us to different thought processes. And then again, how do you absorb, modify, and apply that into your programming? It's just like everybody's exercise pool is going to be different. Like I was coming from a powerlifting background, so the back squat was highly dominant in my program early on. I read a lot of Mike Boyle stuff. One thing I'll always say about Mike Boyle in particular at an early age in my come up was he always stimulated my thought, whether it was agreeable or disagreeable.
Yep.
He always had me thinking.
Yep.
And remember, he was monstrous on the front squat.
Yeah.
And I kept looking at it, and we were using it because when I first wrote the tier system, even though I was making it athletic based, for my football guys, bilateral squatted tiers 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And then we did lunges on one day and step ups on another for 4 and 5. But that's tremendously changed now. And he got me thinking front squat as a tier 1, front squat as a tier 1, front squat as a tier 1. And where does the back squat fit? Because I think there's the balance of single or pseudo single leg work and bilateral squatting type patterns. I think everybody's going to have a percentage mesh.
Yep.
Some will be forward, maybe more forward for the single leg shift versus some to the bilateral. I'm always going to have a combination.
Yep.
And that combination has changed a lot, where a lot of their percentages was pure barbell, bilateral based. And now it is, for the large majority of athletes, tier 1 is always going to be a bilateral based movement.
Yep.
But like tiers 3, 4, and 5 are almost all variations of some type of, based off your terminology, but in a general framework, a single leg solution.
Yeah.
And that's just growth. That's just a growth mindset of really getting out of the meathead mentality and always remembering, what did you build the tier system for? Because I train athletes, not lifters. Okay, well then you got to get out of the lifting mentality regardless. Now, do I believe some sports and some positions of those sports may need 2 bilateral squats early in their career to develop some sense of pure absolute strength? But you're looking at a guy who spent so much time in bilateral squatting that now in his 50s is trying to learn to be more of a single leg squatting or a single leg movement guy because of the deficiencies and compensations over time that I didn't correct on the come up.
Yeah.
You know, I squatted 650 pounds in competition. Yeah, that was with single ply and knee wraps, but still
that's not a bad
not
lift.
a bad load.
No.
But couldn't do a 95-pound barbell lunge.
Right.
So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, for me, it didn't really matter, right? Because I'm like, people say, well, you don't need to lunge anyway, you squat. But I can't have that with an athlete.
Exactly.
And that's what you have, and that's what you learn. So the thing is now is, and that's a lot with the NFL. I give my that's some of the things, again, that's the challenges that never cease to amaze you when we were talking about complacencies and things like that, is the challenges of designing things and listening to things, and then, implementing velocity-based stuff, right? And power. I know Matt Ray and those guys, I think they use watts for some of the things that they're doing. Those things intrigue me, but I'm always going to stick to the success that got you there. Like at the end of the day, if it's 4th and 1, you're going with the most successful play you have for short yardage.
Right.
You're not. Now, once in a while, you're going to Jedi mind trick them and run a bootleg and stuff like that, because people know your tendencies too.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when it's best against best, you're going to run your best play, and you're going to hope they run their best defense and see whose 11 can win.
Yep.
And that's the same thing with program design. You're going to put up your best exercise pool, and hopefully you've hit, because the guys come back with the more resiliency, more robustness, and the capabilities to play longer and healthier because of the things that you're doing with a communication-based deal. So that's, those are the things that are important. And it's the same thing with people. How do you adjust to people? Same way. One of the other things is learning, being willing to learn. I learned so much about being a professional strength coach. And luckily, I had this mindset going in when it came to what I call we talk about being a variable training program or having variety in training.
Yep.
But what you still, whether you still have some type of, people have a lot of rigidity to their program. Like, this is our program. It can't be changed. And that's one thing I've always said is our program is not a rigid program. It's very fluid to what you know. So we'd have a vet come in. We used to say we were vet friendly. That wasn't like people walk all over us.
Right.
It meant that, hey, man, this guy's been somewhere else for 10 years. He's trained this way for 10 years.
Right.
You can't just throw him to the wolves. If the guy's never did an Olympic lift in his career, I can't expect him to do Olympic lifts.
Right.
So what you do is you find out what their that's why exercise pools are so important. Yep. So to me, it was, okay, here's a vet comes in. Tell me what you've done. I would never come out and say, well, what's your exercise pool? I would just say, tell me what exercises you've done and you like and that have benefited you. Okay, I've done this, and this. Great. I'll plug them in to where it fits in our day. So when we come in, you're on the same session as everybody else. It'll be a different rotation than you're used to because we don't split up or lower. But you'll see all the exercises we talked about will be fit in some way, shape, or form.
I like that.
And that's how you do it. Now, at the younger levels, they don't get as much say, right? Where they're still learning the basics. You got to crawl before you can walk. You got to walk before you can run. You got to run before you can sprint. It's just the basics of evolution. It's the same thing. When we figured out finally that you shouldn't train everybody the same way, and we built this what I call modified long-term athletic development model, which is a quadrennial plan for high school and college athletes, it's the same way, right? Year one, it's base fundamentals. And then you're watching these upperclassmen train different. Hey, coach, when can I get there? When you graduate.
Right.
And then hopefully by year 4 or 5, you built up a level of communication and preparation that those people have been in your program enough that they can give you good feedback. Yep. And that's where I was going. That's where I was starting to go to my last year at Louisville and my first 2 years at Louisville, dealing with guys like George Bussey, Joe Tronzo, Eric Wood, guys who could communicate training. And because we had built this program at Arizona State and got to implement it for 2 years at Louisville with a lot of really good success. We just weren't there long enough to see what could have occurred over a period of time. That's why I know what I've learned over the NFL has made me a better coach regardless of where I go next, because of the understandings of, this is my research.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that I believe, again, people have heard me say different things about research, like I'm the research. That's why I don't read the research and stuff like that. But come on, man, I think I've published 4 articles with Matt Ray in high-level research. I understand it's important. I wasn't trying to say that. What I find sometimes are those in the science realm don't give us enough credit for what we're accomplishing without having empirical research.
Right.
Or what they want to call evidence-based research. Well, my evidence is the communication I have with the athlete and the feedback I get from the program. And I talked to this with Lauren Landau once. I go, when is that going to be accepted?
Right.
Because in my world, that's the only
it's the only thing that matters.
Sign off I need.
Right.
I need a 13-year vet to say, man, thanks. I came through pretty solid. I think I can go 14.
Yep. Yeah.
That's evidence-based.
Yeah.
Just like what's evidence-based is house. That sucked.
Right.
Okay. Well, I won't do that again.
Yeah.
And that so there's, when people say evidence-based, what is it based off of? Because that's one thing that I can say now. When me and Matt Ray first started working together, we were trying to really show to bridge the gap between training and athletics.
Yep.
And a lot of times it's hard to get that information because very few people are going to have the ability to do a true research-based testing on athletes, because there's an A group, a B group, and a C group, or there's the group that gets exposed to the cool training and the group that's not. Well, that's hard to justify to coaches. Like, well, why is this guy getting all the good stuff and they're not? This is not going to affect my team to win. But what we're seeing now with Matt and the uniqueness of what they have with Coach Ballou at Alabama is they're working so far together that they're showing different practicalities of research that's a benefit to people like me.
Yeah.
And I'm not disregarding what other people have done. I mean, I don't want this to get into a house is full of shit. He doesn't know what he's talking about because, like I said, I've done qualitative research. And my thing is just that all of it matters.
Yeah,
absolutely. The things that you're doing with the 100 kids that are between the 16 and 21 population that are in a university rec program, there's some merit into to that data as it affects the athletes that I train in the same age group. But the athleticism of those and the program that you tested them on is not the same.
Absolutely.
If that makes sense. And again, that's where we have to continue to find ways to work together.
Yep.
And Matt and I, we worked together on certain things in 2002. And it's funny, I was chatting with him the other day, and I was like, yeah, this is funny how now you have the things that we didn't have 15 years ago to prove that we were on the right path.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just the way it is. So those are things that I think are important. And like I said, it's hard. It's hard to, again, all this is self-reflection, Mike. It's like I said, this is not me trying to prove that my programming is better than others. Anybody who writes a program could get benefit out of, oh, that's pretty cool that he just took his major upper body deal and made it a 3-pronged approach.
Yep.
Like I did a little exercise program the other day for myself. I was sore for days because I'm bad at this stuff and I was like, well, this would probably be a good tier 2 or 3 movement where I did a 6-10 extended set where I did 6 reps of a rear foot elevated squat and went right into 10 reps of hamstring curl. Ooh. Of a standing hamstring. So I did right leg 6 reps, very limited rest, right into left leg for 6 reps, walked over to the standing leg curl machine and did 10 and 10. And then I can't remember, rested. I think it was probably a little bit, the way I did my rounds, it probably was around a minute rest and did that for 5 rounds.
Oof.
Yeah, not fun when you have not fun when you have no balance, your single leg strength's terrible, you need hamstring strength regardless, and you've got 8 previous knee surgeries. So I was sore but there's merit in that type of work. Yep. And that to me that's practical research. Like,
absolutely.
How does this fit into a program? Where does this fit? It's got quality movements. It's got an in-place pseudo single leg movement, a squat-based movement, followed by an isolative knee flexion that can help for protection and overall hamstring durability.
Love it. Okay.
So those are, so like I said, so going back to certain things, like to me, from programming, it's all exercise pool-based. Like Mike Boyle could use the tier system to write his programs, but his pool is going to be way different than it was even 5 years ago. Yep. His tier 1 is going to be a rear foot elevated squat, and his tier 2 may be a pistol squat or a lunge, but it's going to be 5 tiers of variations of single leg, pseudo single leg, or pure single leg movements. And that's okay, right?
Yep.
That's what he believes in. And that's what people got to understand, man. There's just so many different ways to skin it that it all comes back to your belief in yourself, your belief in your program, and the athletes that you have, understanding your commitment to it, and then you showing them the relevancy of what it can do for them in their sport of choice.
Love it. Okay. One more question, and then I'm going to let you go. So 32 years in, as we discussed before, the only voted on strength and conditioning coach of the year in collegiate and pro. But you said you got maybe one more run. What is the future of Joe Kenn? What are you going to do next, man? You checked a lot of boxes.
It's a lot of great questions, and I'm checking a new one right here with Dynamic. It's a totally different side of the realm. It's something I've been involved with, right? I've designed weight rooms, I've helped design lines of equipment, and now I'm really in on the walking a plant and watching how this stuff's being made and what goes behind R&D and development. In the end, I think that's just going to make me overall. I'm always going to be involved in some type of fitness related process. I can't go out and start selling stock, right?
Right.
So I think this is a role that was suited for me at the time, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Tammy and Kurt for giving me an opportunity to work with Dynamic and help push them forward to greater heights. And the processes of still being able to stay somewhat relevant by writing stuff and doing things on my own through Big House Power as far as educating coaches and giving them a different spin off of what's being out there in social media.
Yeah.
But, again, man, who's to say what's next? All I know is whatever it is, if it's dynamic, then this is my big run. And I got to continue to learn the business. Is it another coaching opportunity? It's based on who you know, right? It has nothing to do with my resume.
Right.
It's opportunity, who's in there, who knows you, who will champion for you, and where that may come. So I look at it this way, man. I cherish the fact that I had the runs I've had. I actually, coached my dream job. My dream job was to coach the Carolina Panthers. Does the next job become my dream job? No, but it's a dream, right? To coach.
Right.
It's an opportunity, and I live a dream every day. I mean, my whole life's been built around being somewhere in a weight room since the time I was 13 years old, and I still get to do that in just a different sense of doing it. And I can still bring my expertise and my capabilities and my mentorship to coaches around the globe based off the fact that there is an internet, based off the fact that I am allowed to travel, that coaches know that I'm available. And like you said, there's different things that I can do now, not being with a team, that I couldn't do with a team.
Yep.
So the values of that, and I'm spending more time, like my granddaughter said she was glad I got fired because now she gets to see me all the time. You know what I'm saying? So it's funny. It's stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole new realm out there. But like I said, the only questions I ask are the ones that I can answer myself.
Yep.
And I don't worry about other things. I used to worry about it a lot. Like, what do people really think of me? Why didn't I get that job over so-and-so? Why they send me the thanks but no thanks letter, but you have impressive credentials? Well, then why didn't I get an interview? I don't worry about that because it's not about someone beat you or someone was better than you. What I've learned over time is it's fit. It's fit and relationships.
Yep.
You could go into an interview and kill it and think you're going to get the job only to find out you didn't. And then when you peel back that onions, you find out, well, 2 coaches on the staff worked with the guy beforehand and they jumped on the table for him. Well, then you look at the staff. Well, I had nobody on the staff jumping on the table for me.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Has nothing to do with, is so-and-so a better coach, or is so-and-so this, or they brought this to the table and you couldn't. A lot of it's going to come down to, hey, this guy's good, but these 2 dudes worked with him. Yeah. So we know what we're getting. And so fit is important. And right now I've got a good fit. I work with some really good people. We've hired some really, really good, strong people in the field. We just, a couple of weeks, we'll make another post on another hire we made, and people in this realm will realize that that's a big get for us. So we're excited moving forward. So again, I know this, man. I woke up this morning, so it's going to be a
win,
good day.
right? I love it.
I get to go in the weight room and get some weights done, and I got to have elbow surgery though, so I'm not too keen on that.
Ooh, it's not good, man.
Well, it'd be different if it was but it's that like ulnar nerve impingement, cubital tunnel syndrome. So I've got issues in my fingers, so I've already lost some grip strength. So I wouldn't get it done if it was just little like bone spurs and range of motion stuff. But you know how the nerves are, man.
Yeah.
That's not something I want to mess with down the road.
No, I got you, man. I got you. Well, House, always great catching up with you, man. Where can my listeners find out more about you and all the great work you're doing?
Well, the best, I mean, obviously, so we talked about it. Social media, you should listen and do everything I say. But that's at Big House Power. We're doing some really cool stuff at Dynamic. I think everybody nowadays has some type of educational message in their equipment team.
Yep.
But our blog, our 60-second strength coach blog that we have, is got I'm really happy with the material that's on it because it's extremely practical. And I think for the older coach, there's a lot of reaffirmation. And for the younger coach, man, just stuff you might not really be thinking about that will help spur some thought. Again, the thought process is huge, right? Embrace the process. You got to be able to stimulate thought. And that's all I want to do. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm trying to enhance your thought process of what you're doing and how to make it better for your athletes. And then my website is www.bighousepower.com.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure I get those in the show notes. But as always, my guy, great having you on, man. It was great catching up.
Yeah, I think we just smoked McCloy. McCloy can't go 2 hours or an hour and a half.
No.
We could have kept going.
No, this is the light work for us, man. Light
Yeah,
work.
and when you off the script, we live for off the script.
I love it. All right, my friend, that does it for this week's episode. Sincerely hope you enjoyed it. Man, I just can't say enough good things about Coach Kenn, somebody that I deeply respect, somebody that I look up to and admire for his success in this field, for the way he carries himself, for the fact that he's principle-based. Like I said, I mean, I just can't say enough good things about him. I respect the hell out of him, and he's somebody that I consistently look to for sound knowledge and for being a no BS kind of guy. I mean, he's going to call it like he sees it when it comes to programming, when it comes to coaching, and when it comes to other coaches. So if you're not already following him on the socials, I would definitely be doing that because he's somebody I think you can learn a ton from. So if you would do me one small favor, if you enjoy this show, please take 2 seconds out of your day today to subscribe. Wherever you consume podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Store, wherever you consume podcasts, you can find us there. You can subscribe, and that way you'll know each and every week when a new episode drops. So again, my friend, if you enjoy this episode, it's my goal to make every episode something that you can learn from and something that's going to be of value to you as a trainer, coach, or rehab professional. So do that for me now. And, as always, thank you so much for your support. Love and appreciate you. And we'll be back soon with our next episode. Take care.